It was a cold winter night, December 31st. I was at home, alone, when my friend Leo, with whom I had shared some life experiences, asked me for a somewhat unusual favor. He was going to spend New Year's in a cabin in the countryside with his family and needed someone to look after his little dog, Bonnie, for a few days. Bonnie was a small mutt, full of energy but very calm for those who knew her. I, at 32 years old, with a pretty laid-back routine, didn't mind spending the night at home taking care of her. Leo was 30 years old and our friendship was relatively new. We met at a social event and since then we had become casual friends, hanging out for drinks and conversation now and then. He always told me how much he loved traveling to peaceful places away from the city, and he was excited about this year-end trip. Leo's instructions were simple: feed Bonnie, take her for quick walks, and make sure she didn't get on the furniture. He dropped me off at his house late in the afternoon and told me he'd be back Sunday night. I, on my part, was more interested in relaxing, watching some movies, and having a peaceful evening as the year ended. I'm not much into parties, and a quiet New Year's Eve at home seemed like the perfect option. I brought a backpack with my essentials: charger, headphones, and a change of clothes for the next day. Leo wasn't one to share much about his personal life, but he often mentioned his past relationships. The house was simple and cozy, with a comfortable living room where I spent most of the evening watching shows and playing with Bonnie. The night was calm until around 11:30 p.m. when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and Bonnie immediately started barking as if she already knew something was wrong. When I opened the door, a woman with dark hair and a wool coat was standing there, looking a bit nervous, asking to speak with me. She introduced herself as Mariana and said she had left a piece of clothing at Leo's apartment and had come to pick it up. She looked about 28 years old, and her behavior was a mix of polite and anxious. Not knowing exactly what to do, I suggested she go upstairs to get the clothes on her own, since Leo hadn't mentioned anything about visitors. She hesitated but eventually agreed and went upstairs. As she climbed the stairs, I sent Leo a message: "Who is this Mariana?" It didn't take long for him to reply, but the answer wasn't what I expected. "I don't know any Mariana," he said. I was confused and decided to keep an eye on what was happening. When she came back a few minutes later, still holding the piece of clothing, she seemed off, with an expression I couldn't quite read. She thanked me and left quickly. I had a strange feeling and decided to call Leo, who answered with a more confused tone. "I don't know who this Mariana is," he said, clearly surprised. He asked how she was dressed and I described the woman. Leo seemed to be getting irritated but asked me to check if she had taken anything from the house. I wasn't sure what to look for, but after searching a few items in the room, I confirmed that nothing seemed out of place. Leo asked me to send photos of everything, which only increased the feeling that something strange was going on. The tone of his voice made it clear he was really confused, almost desperate. He sent me some pictures of women he knew, but none of them resembled the Mariana I had seen. Then he went silent for a while until, after a long pause, he sent me a message saying, "I think I know who she was. Don't let her come back here." I was still not fully understanding everything, but at that moment, I decided to try to relax and wait for the night to end. Later, Carol, my girlfriend, arrived to keep me company. When she came in, I told her what had happened. Carol was just as confused as I was, but soon after, something even stranger happened. Bonnie, who had been lying beside me, suddenly lifted her head and walked over to the door, starting to bark frantically. She stared at the door and began to growl. I got up to see what was happening, and to my surprise, someone knocked on the door. But it wasn't the doorbell. It was a soft knock, as if they knew we were home and didn't want to draw too much attention. I tried calling Leo, but he didn't answer, clearly still in the middle of a meeting with friends. Carol, now scared, called the police. The knock was followed by a female voice saying, "I know you're in there, open the door." I froze, quickly telling Carol to stay quiet. Then, in a whisper, I asked her to call the police. The voice on the other side of the door grew more aggressive. "Who's there? Open the door now." I, however, kept calm and responded aloud, "The police are on their way." The voice outside fell silent for a moment, then I heard quick footsteps moving away. Carol, still trembling, called the police and reported the situation. When the officers arrived, they checked the front door, which was open, but there was no one there. What worried me most was the fact that the woman had tried to enter so discreetly, as if she knew she could do so without being seen. After investigating, the police concluded that the woman had likely taken an extra key of Leo's, something he hadn't known about. The mystery deepened even further when they discovered that the woman was an ex-girlfriend of Leo's, someone he had had a falling out with a few months earlier. She had been trying to return to his house but not to steal anything, and that was the scariest part of it all. She wanted something more, something he wasn't willing to give. The next morning, Leo called me again, now calmer but still visibly irritated. He confirmed that Mariana was indeed a problematic ex-girlfriend, and that he had changed the locks months ago. Leo apologized for putting me in this situation and assured me that he would take more precautions in the future. However, I couldn't shake the uncomfortable feeling that lingered in my mind. What did she really want? And why had she been so persistent in trying to get into the house? The situation seemed more complicated than just a jealous ex-girlfriend. Something still didn't feel right. 2 days after the incident, Leo called me again. His voice sounded strange, distorted with worry. He seemed to have lost some of his composure, more tense than usual. "Man, you're not going to believe what I found. I don't know what to do anymore," he said, already sounding desperate. I knew something was wrong, but the gravity of the situation caught me by surprise. He started to tell me that after our last phone call, he had gone to investigate the house, particularly his office, where Mariana had apparently gone through some things. But what he found was even more bizarre. A document on his computer, a letter written by him, but with a date from 6 months ago when he had broken up with Mariana. He vaguely remembered writing the letter but had no memory of actually doing it. The letter seemed too personal, yet strangely familiar. It started with a reflection on the end of their relationship, a series of emotions and thoughts that Leo might have shared with her at the time. However, what really disturbed him was the end of the letter. In it, he talked about how he felt Mariana pulling away from his life, but that something kept bringing her back, almost as if it were some greater force, something he couldn't control. The letter ended with a promise that if she wanted to come back to him, he would be there, but warning her that he was changing and that if she tried to manipulate his life again, he would push her away forever. Leo told me that as he read, he felt a growing sense of confusion and paranoia. He couldn't remember writing those words, but he knew that his own hand had typed the letter. He had never sent it, and he had never talked to anyone about how he felt at the time, so how had it appeared on his computer, exactly as he remembered it, but with details he didn't remember thinking about back then? "I don't remember this. I don't remember writing this. I didn't even know I had kept this letter. And the craziest thing, man, it was on my computer like it was something normal. I never left anything there." He was visibly shaken, as if his mind was trying to hide something from him. He asked me if I thought he was losing his mind. Before I could respond, he told me more. He had started searching for more files on his computer, trying to understand what was happening, when he found something even more disturbing, an audio recording. He didn't know where it came from or how it got there, but it was a recording of a conversation between him and Mariana. The conversation seemed to be from a night they had spent together before their breakup. But the most terrifying part was when, in the middle of the conversation, he heard something that froze him. Mariana said, in a soft voice, almost like emotional blackmail, that she knew exactly what he wanted, and that if he didn't take her back, she would make him forget everything, even his own identity. "I'm going to make you forget everything we had, Leo. You'll start seeing things for what they really are. Don't worry, darling. I'll help you remember who you really are," she said. When Leo told me this, I felt a chill run down my spine. Her words had a strange tone, as if she knew something about him that he didn't even know himself. As if she had some power over his mind, psychological manipulation, or perhaps something even deeper. He didn't know what to think. It was then that he told me he had started to make more alarming discoveries. He began to realize that there were gaps in his life, parts of his past that he couldn't clearly remember, events that seemed to have happened but made no sense. He mentioned a farewell dinner he had with Mariana, a night he swore had never happened, but all the details were there, recorded on his social media, photos, messages. And once again he didn't remember any of it. His mind seemed to be erasing and replacing parts of his reality with a distorted version. Leo told me he began to suspect that something much deeper was at play, perhaps even involving some form of mind control. He recalled some conversations he'd had with friends where they joked about hypnosis and memory, but now he wondered if those jokes weren't so harmless after all. He told me he had read about secret groups that manipulated people's perceptions, creating false memories and altering reality in invisible ways. He feared that, somehow, he had become involved in something much bigger than he had ever imagined. The last thing he told me, which left me utterly speechless, was this: "I went to my country house where she spent some time after we broke up, and I found something strange there. A key. An old key, one I didn't recognize. I'm sure I've never seen it before. But when I picked it up, something in my mind, I knew what it was for." He ended the call by saying he was going to the country house once again to investigate further. I, on the other hand, began to wonder if I had gotten too involved in this whole story. Why was he so obsessed with Mariana? Why was he starting to doubt his own mind? But at the same time, I knew something was wrong. Something much bigger that he couldn't see. Leo called me later, now in a panic. He was at his country house, and when he entered, the front door was open. Once again he found the same computer, the same letter, and a photo of himself but older. The look in his own image was vacant, as if he were losing some important part of himself. The key he had found? It opened a secret door, leading to a small hidden room, full of objects he never knew he had. I found everything. I found everything I lost. I'm not me anymore, Leo said, not knowing if he could trust his own mind. At that moment, I realized Leo was involved in something much darker than I could have ever imagined. The memory game, psychological manipulation, and mind control were just beginning, and Mariana, or whoever she was at the center of it all. She knew too much, and Leo was now being pushed into a mental labyrinth from which he might never escape. When he returned once more to his house, the mystery grew denser. Leo no longer seemed like the same person. He seemed lost, as if a part of him had been permanently erased. And the most terrifying part, the name Mariana, the name of everything that had happened, began to disappear from his mind. He no longer knew who he was, or worse, who he was supposed to be. He disappeared a week later, and no one ever heard from Leo again. When I searched for him, all I found was the key, an old key with an inscription that read only, "What you don't know is what you will never forget."